All right, we got one more of these team preview shows here this weekend, and then we'll segue back into fantasy draft prep. We still do not have the updated Yahoo board, interestingly. JJJ still at 30. That's the I'm not looking. I admit it, I'm not looking at all the names. I'm just looking at the first 30 and looking at like who's at 20, 25, and 30. And if any of them is different, then I can go and say, oh, the whole thing, it's different. It's a brand new board. But there's Harden still at 25, and there's Brunson still at 20. So we'll get around to that. Today, we're talking Chicago Bulls on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Bespris, at Dan Bespris on social media, at Old Man Squad. Drop a follow of our new network. Our new network. I guess it's my new network, but I'm just really happy to have all of these awesome folks that have joined up to be part of it so far. More coming, by the way. More coming. It'll follow you back, too. It's at 994. The race to 1,000 is almost complete. I'll also ask you at the front end here, please like, rate, subscribe. If you're watching, hit that like button. It does indeed help. Drops it right into the recommended feed for people that are looking for fantasy stuff. And subscriptions, then you'll see everything that's coming out on the channel. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, etc. And then you'll get every episode there as well. If you have time to do a 5-star review, that would also be extraordinarily helpful. All right, I think that's pretty much the whatever we got to get through on the administrative side. Let's dive into the Chicago Bulls, and that's a weird one. And I'll admit, kind of waited on this one because it's so freaking weird. The Bulls are caught in no man's land. A team that lost DeMar DeRozan in a sign and trade, but netted some sort of low-level assets. Unloaded Alex Caruso, who might be the best perimeter point-of-attack defender in the NBA, and brought back Josh Giddey. Zack LaVine is still floating in a spaceship in outer space. It sounds like he might be playing to start the year, but they don't want him there. His contract is so big, they can't get rid of him. So there's just so much at play with Chicago. Looking at the team last year, they had, over the course of an entire season, 6 players that registered top 100 per game numbers. But there's also a lot of stuff around the edges that sort of created this situation. And I think it's important to point out that there were stretches that Andre Drummond was a top 100 guy. There were long stretches where Ayo Dosunmu was a top 100 guy. And Javonte Green was just 9 games, so his is small sample size theater. And with Patrick Williams signing the extension and expected to be healthy to start the year, there's just not that much available. So what we often like to do on the show is instead look at the last 2 months for a team season as opposed to the entire thing. Again, not looking too hard at the Javonte Green 9 ball games. Your rankings for the Bulls over the last 2 months were DeMar DeRozan at 25. Yeah, I know. Still very good. Alex Caruso at 35. Extraordinary 2.3 steals over that stretch. Javonte Green, who we're going to jump over basically at 57 if we find out that somehow, the full detonation happens and he starts to play more or whatever. We'll worry about that down the line. Vooch at 61. Dosunmu was 64th over those last 25-ish ball games. Coby White was number 148. Let's start with Coby White, and I'll just work my way up the board. I think we could have potentially finished with him because he's probably the most polarizing of the Bulls' potential draft. Well, Zack LaVine is also in that mix, as is Vooch. Actually, that's not true. I think everybody's kind of soured on Vooch this year. But starting with Coby White, 148 over the last 2 months, I think is going to surprise people in an extraordinary way because it felt like, to the uninitiated, to the folks that are not taking a microscope to it and instead just sort of looking from far away and going, it looks like he's doing a lot. But as you look closer at the Coby White situation, he averaged 18 points, 2.2 3-pointers, a good free throw number, 87%. But other than that, you kind of only got a small bump out of assists. He was very bad at defensive stats, 0.8 combined steals and blocks over that stretch. Rebounds were fine, like nothing really to care about there. And a very poor field goal percent. And I think Coby White ends up being the player that people really couldn't figure out. I was down on White this past season. I'm fully willing to admit that. And I don't think it's an L, by the way. He ended up number 99 in 9 category leagues. Yes, he ended up being someone that you wanted on your fantasy team as soon as Zach LaVine went down. But I don't think, I mean, even if you thought Zach LaVine was in some sort of trouble of being traded, I don't think most of us thought he was playing 25 games last year. I get that maybe he got moved. Someone would have come back in such a scenario. This was absolutely the best case Coby White situation, which was that LaVine went down and never came back. Patrick Williams ultimately also went down. Not that that had quite as large of an impact. But White had about as much usage as he was going to get. DeMar DeRozan's gone. Yes. But we have to assume for now that Zach LaVine is sliding into DeRozan's spot, basically. Because if you go back and you go rolling backwards through the years with Chicago, the previous season, LaVine took 18 shots and DeRozan took 17.6. Last year, DeRozan took 18.3. Coby White slid into a lot of those extra shots. He went up from 8 to like 15 or 16. But to think, DeRozan's 18 is going to go somewhere else, LaVine's going to get, if he's playing, 15 or more of those. On top of that, you have Josh Giddey to think about, who, as Josh pointed out on our show a couple days ago, the Bulls have talked about him being the prize return. Because everybody wants to talk about how, the Bulls only got Josh Giddey for Alex Caruso. And the Bulls are like, no. Nay, we got Josh Giddey for Alex Caruso. They're stoked about it, or at least that's what they're putting out publicly. So you should assume that Giddey's going to be the full-time point guard there, meaning probably a dozen or more shots. He's going to have the ball in his hand. That, combined with the return of LaVine, is actually more. I know Caruso went out, but he was only at 8.5 shots per ball game. More is coming in than going out so far. So the situation gets murkier. On top of everything else, Alex Caruso was a wing, and the guys coming, and DeRozan was a wing. These are guys that could play anywhere from the 2 through the 4 spots, basically, depending on how the Bulls wanted to deploy either of them. The guys coming back, Zach LaVine ain't playing power forward. Josh Giddey ain't playing power forward. These guys are the point guard, the shooting guard, small forward at the absolute largest. So the Bulls got smaller in this trade-off. Perhaps not in actual size and weight, but in the position that a guy's going to be expected to deal with defensively. You could have put DeRozan because he's old and bigger and slower. You could have thrown him out there if you wanted to put him at the 4. You could have done it. So you got more minutes coming in at the guard spots and small forward than went out. And all of that rolls into if this is what Coby White is, we can even do past 3 months, although this page probably needs to refresh. No, it actually did it on itself. Past 3 months, final 3 months of the season, Coby White was number 110. Basically, from the moment Zach LaVine went down, Coby White hung around the edge of the top 100 on big scoring, some assists, and a good free throw percent. He was, we've referred to this before, your fairly prototypical shooting guard fantasy stat line. It's hard to move way up the board on the shooting guard's fantasy stat line unless you have steals. Typically, a shooting guard that wants to be up near the top needs to be good at 1 or 2 additional things. They need to be good at steals or field goal percent or both. Because they're not going to be good at rebounding. They're going to be good at probably scoring and free throws and maybe threes. Turnovers are going to be probably mid-pack, somewhere in there. All that to say, I forget what Coby White's rank is right now. He's somewhere in the board. Wait, we can do this. We can do this search really fast. Where are you, Coby? Coby White? Hello? The search is not working. Why isn't this working? I'm trying to find it in this sheet, my Google sheet, and it's not there. Wait, now we can do this. Where are you, Coby White? 87. People might look at that and think, oh, this is a guy that could give you, 20 points a ball game or whatever. And maybe that's true. I don't think he's getting to 20, but maybe it's true. But getting past 87 is going to be a heavy lift for White. And so I'm not super on board with that one. Ayo Dosunmu, the second half of last year, was number 63. I am a big Ayo fan. You guys know that about me. I've talked favorably about him because he doesn't have the typical shooting guard stat line. It's similar to Coby White, doesn't score as well, but he's way more efficient. Field goal percent is a massive leap, and he's good defensively. Steals and blocks out of Ayo from that point guard, shooting guard, small forward spot. However, with Josh Giddey coming in, I think you get a little bit wedged in. That's not to say that I wouldn't give him a look if he went far enough in a draft. But it's hard for me to suggest targeting pretty much any of the guards on Chicago. Because how's this all going to shake out? Where is it going to come from? Zach LaVine, Ayo Dosunmu, Coby White, and Josh Giddey. These four guys. Can they find enough in, I don't know, are we going to say 3 positions on the floor where you'd assume other dudes are going to pick up a minute, 2 minutes, a couple of minutes somewhere along the way? Maybe. Of those guys, Ayo and maybe Zach LaVine have the most fantasy-friendly games for 9 category purposes. Coby White's a little bit of a punt field goal or punt steal kind of thing, which is pretty typical for a guard, as Adam Stock reminded us. You don't that doesn't help guys all that much because there's too many dudes that are all that same thing. Ayo, he's a non-punt dude, so he's more of a roto 9 category across the board guy. And I don't think his 80, did I even get to his pre-rank? Let's see, where are you? 107. Honestly, that's higher than I expected. Forgot where that was, but that's higher than I thought. Probably not taking him at 107. He's the kind of guy that I was hoping would be like in the 130, 140 range. And maybe he will be on the next board reshuffling, but he did have such a good second half last year that's why you're seeing him where he's at. But again, much like with Coby White, the job gets tougher. Finding an avenue to do things gets tougher. Getting into the 60s feels like a big lift as well. Beating 107, not impossible, especially if Zach LaVine gets moved, and we know they're trying to do that. So maybe that's the built-in value there, and that's why I wanted to take him after the 10th round. This is a guy that I was hoping I could, plop on a bench. He's going to do some stuff, and he's not going to hurt you anywhere in whatever format you got. Roto, you can leave him on the bench until Zach LaVine gets shut down or traded or moved or whatever, if somebody gets hurt. Ayo is really one thing away. Because of how good his fantasy game is, he's really just one small thing away from being a very useful fantasy player. But what do you do while you're waiting for that one thing to happen? Roto, you just don't deploy him against the games cap. Head to head, you're like, hopefully I can get like 12, 3, and 3 out of him and maybe a steal and 0.4 blocks or something, and that'll get him in the 120 range. It's kind of doesn't matter territory. But it's one thing away, and there's a lot of one things that could happen. LaVine could get hurt. Giddey's been relatively durable, but if he misses a game or if White misses a game, any one of those guys, frankly, if Patrick Williams has to miss a game and they size up and go Torrey, do they still have Torrey Craig on that team? Doesn't matter. They might have to size up a little bit, have no choice. Frankly, even if they move Vooch, where Jalen Smith rolls in and does a bunch of stuff, but not as much as Vooch did. So that trickles down to the other guys. So there's a lot of one small thing that could happen to get Ayo to value, but I don't want to take him with a 9th round pick. I want to use my 9th rounder on somebody that I know is going to be doing stuff right out of the chute. For example, guys near Dosunmu on the Yahoo pre-rank board right now, Jakob Poeltl, 25 plus minutes as a really interesting fantasy line center. Caruso's right there. John Collins, if he gets decent minutes in Utah, he can go way past this. Zubats is about 5 slots, behind him. Anunoby's right there. Mike Conley's right there. I take a guy that I know is going to get either significant or significant plus minutes over a guy like Ayo, where what do we think the Bulls' starting five is this year? That's another great question. I would think it's Giddey, White, LaVine, Patrick Williams, and Vooch. And Ayo's probably the guy coming off the bench there. But again, what if we get word in a month that Zach LaVine isn't doing anything? What if they're like, yeah, we're going to sit him until we move him? Anyway, next deal on the board, we're gonna jump over Javonte Green. Vooch over the final 3 months last year was number 43, which again, pretty good. I liked Vooch last year because he was pre-ranked, fell into the 60s, and the Bulls had given no indication that they had given up. Oh, by the way, I almost forgot, and this would have been one of the examples of why to do a live show, because somebody would have been like, Dan, I got one more thing for you. Lonzo Ball might play this year. I'm in kind of the got to see it to believe it mode, but it could happen. And that's another 15 to 25 minutes that's going to get wedged out of those point guard buckets. And a reason, by the way, we'll talk about Josh Giddey last on this one, but another reason to fade a little bit there too. There are a few guys that, and we're still talking about Vooch right now. And Vooch is one of those guys that if he is the starting center for this team coming into the season, he'll do something between 40 and 65 because that's just sort of who he is. It's extraordinarily boring. He'll average somewhere between 15 and 19 points. He'll get you around 10 rebounds. He's not going to get many steals or blocks, but together it'll be just enough. His percentages are generally pretty good. He'll get you a little over a three-pointer on not great shooting from out there, and he's not going to turn it over. He's very nine-cat friendly, and it's why Vooch has been on the old man squad for countless years in a row. But you can hear the butt is coming, and a big butt at that. Sizable butt. No, we're not talking about Kyle Lowry. We're talking about Vooch. The big but is that the Bulls are trying to move him too. And his contract is much, much more movable than Zack LaVine's. Not that it's good necessarily. I think Vooch is on a $20 million deal. But like, we're talking about what team would want a Clint Capella. Well, what if you altered that? Slightly worse rim protection. Okay, significantly worse rim protection, but you gain a bunch offensively. Someone out there would think about a Vooch contract, especially if the Bulls attached something to it. They could get off of this one pretty fast because it's 20 mil this year, 21 next season. It's not backbreaking. And if there are teams that are in tank mode, they'll take on a contract like that, move it again next year. Bulls want to get rid of money. That's what this really comes down to. They want money gone. And that's why I'm afraid of Vooch. Even at his very reasonable price tag, which I think is like 49? How did I forget that? That's way too early on Vooch. Whoa. Oh, my. Whiffed on that one. For some reason, I thought that was like 62. That's where he finished his last pre-rank last season before the year started. It was about 62, 64, and that to me was a no-brainer. And he drilled that one. That was an easy win. He was 51 on the year. He played in 76 ball games. So by totals, he was even better than that. I think he was in the 30s by totals. 51 per game this year with a chance to do less, with a chance to not care on a team that might not be trying to win so much. And with the trade stuff hanging over him, I just don't want Vooch this year. If he falls past 60 to 65 range, I would probably think about it as a very reasonable. I mean, get 4 decent months out of him if they trade him at the deadline or whatever. And any place that he goes, he'll probably do something. It's not like he's going to fall out of the top 100, but I don't want to spend pick 49 on a guy who's going to be probably worse than that per game this year. No, thank you. Sorry, Vooch. You're off the old man squad this year after a really good run. But you got to know when to abandon ship. You know, you can't chase. You might have a lot of wins on a guy, but eventually it comes to an end. We're not going to talk about Alex Caruso, obviously, because he's on the Thunder now. We're going to talk DeMar DeRozan. Over the last 3 months, he was number 21. Still freaking good, man. DeRozan had a pre-rank in the 40s last year. He was very much on the old man squad, and he was also a super, super easy win. He was also very durable, played in 79 out of 82 games. That made him number 14 by totals. He's one of the big reasons that my 30-deep team made it to the damn finals. I love DeMar. He's also not there. We've already done our Sacramento Kings show. I think DeMar DeRozan is going to be a value again this year. I'll repeat that. Say it on the Bulls episode. DeMar's pre-rank is later than Vooch, 56. Absolutely. Absolutely, I'll go DeMar at 56. But let's talk about the guys that are on the Bulls that didn't really do anything last year. Zach LaVine, who started the year grumpy and out of sorts, and he was number 82 because basically couldn't shoot. Field goal percent was down to 45, 19.5 points, 5 boards, 4 assists. I think this is actually a kind of reasonable expectation for him to start the year. Maybe not the 35 minutes, but approaching 20 points. The shooting guard's stat line. We just talked about it with Coby White. It's hard to post value as a shooting guard with the traditional shooting guard stat line. You need to be good at one extra thing. Luckily for Zach LaVine, prior to this season where he was presumably pretty beat up, and his not that his 2-point percent was all that far down. His 3-point percent was down. His 2-point percent was down a little bit, but he'd been down that low before. It just all kind of rolled together to a lower effective field goal percent this last season. His effective field goal percent was 53. He hadn't been that low since 2019, 2020. The Rudy Gobert COVID year. It's a different kind of COVID. There's the planned shortened season, and then there's the Gobert shortened season. I kid. Last 3 years in Chicago, he shot 51, 48, and 49%. It seemed like LaVine had kind of become that guy. So if we assume that he's actually coming to this season healthy, I think we can assume that the field goal percent will also tick back up a little bit. From 45 to hopefully 46, 47, 48, or 49. I don't know which one it's going to be, but I think we can hope on that. And that is the additional category. If you want to be a shooting guard with good fantasy stats, you got to be good at either steals or field goal percent. If you're not going to be doing good at the other stuff, I think he can do it on the field goal percent side. He's also a better rebounder than Coby White, even if the assists are not quite as strong. So, sorry, I got sidetracked. I got sidetracked watching a Dodgers play. Bad podcaster, Dan, but whatever. It's a weekend, so I wanted to see what happened. So now it comes down to, if we think, there's a whole lot of stuff. Okay, we're not past the first thing on Zach LaVine. They want to move him too. But the nice thing about LaVine is anywhere he goes, he's going to be a medium to high usage guy. Nobody's trading for LaVine to give him, 13, 14 shots a game. Somebody's going for LaVine. They're going to go get him and give him 15 shots or more. Okay? Fair. So don't worry too much about what if he gets moved. I'm more worried that the Bulls are just like, we can't play you because if you get hurt again, then we can't move you. They're going to have enough trouble moving him anyway. If he's hurt, they'll never get off that contract. That's what worries me about LaVine. But I think he probably wants to show teams he's lively. He's got his spring back and, workout videos and training camp is not going to convince teams that he can go 30-plus minutes a ball game and go hard for 30-plus minutes a ball game. They're going to need more than that. So I think LaVine's going to play to start the year. And I think he'll play starters minutes, 30. And that should get him inside, I would think, the top 90. But the reason to look at Zach LaVine is not for where he starts, it's for where he ends. Zach LaVine, if they move him and he is reinvigorated by a new location, you might get a Zach LaVine that's a little bit more like, say, 2018, 2019 Chicago, which maybe doesn't get up to 18 shots a ball game, but a little more pep in his step. A full steal per game, that's good. Better field goal percent, that's good. Those Zach LaVine years were more around 50 to 65, 70 range. He's pre-ranked 71, which I'll admit, I thought he was going to be way lower after he played a quarter of the games last season. I thought he was going to get pre-ranked in the 80s, and I was going to be all about it. 71 is a bit of a coin flip for me. If he falls past that, like, I don't think I would use my end of 6th round pick on Zach LaVine, but I would probably use my end of 7th round pick on him, because now you're debating between Zach LaVine or frickin' teammate Coby White. I'd rather have Zach LaVine. Or Giddey. I'd rather have Zach LaVine. I mean, if Tobias Harris falls that far, I'd obviously go Toby. Zach LaVine or Bradley Beal? Well, you probably go with the dude who's healthy to start the year and go with Beal. Zach LaVine or, I don't know, Bogdan Bogdanovic? Probably go LaVine. Starting to hunt upside a little bit there. At 70, though, that's a freaking risk, man. Again, even very good Zach LaVine over the years was still hovering in the late 40s because of that shooting guard stat set. Nothing ever really got so good, that extra category of, field goal percent or steals or threes or something. Nothing ever quite got up and over that hump to where he was able to jump into the next echelon of player. There were years where he got close. .45, I think there was in there someplace. But I don't remember him really getting any higher than that. Oh, the COVID shortened year when it was Zach LaVine and Vooch versus the universe, and he took 19 shots a game. Yeah, that's where he got a little better. He also shot 51% that season. So that's the one, but he ain't taking 19 and a half shots a game. That was just also the 51% shooting. You're probably looking at 50 range. Yes, there's some edge there between 70 and 50. But the risk is pretty big looking for a round and a half of value there. I think you can find a round and a half of value of someone who's not quite as risky. But again, if he falls another round, 80s, and you're talking maybe 25, 30 jump, that's when I start to say, okay. Josh Lloyd on Friday's show gave you guys a pretty good explanation as to why he's looking at Josh Giddey this coming season, but he also mentioned reasons why not to. Kind of gave you both sides of it. I lean a little bit more towards the not on Giddey, and I think part of that is because I'm a roto guy and not head-to-head, and Giddey does profile a little bit more as someone who could be good at points and boards and assists out of that point guard spot. And again, he was better at free throws, but wasn't a positive there. He was sort of a net neutral, but very weak in three-pointers from a guard spot. Generally not that great in defensive stats. Not horrible, but not that great. And turnovers are probably going to be pretty high. I would assume close to 3 this year. So for Roto, the sort of end result is, there's as many bad things as good things. In head-to-head, you're like, well, if I'm punting any one of those weak things, if I'm punting threes, Josh Giddey is a great selection. If I'm punting turnovers, he's a solid selection, not outstanding, but still okay. Again, like, he's decent enough in both percentages now where those are not really part of the punt equation. He's a little bit of a punt steals guard. You expect your point guard to get you more than 0.8 per ball game, and maybe he does play a little more and gets you to like 1 steal a game, but that's still not great out of your guard. But again, punt threes in particular, Josh Giddey makes a lot of sense. So let's say you wind up with Shea with your first round pick. Giddey would be a very interesting middle late round guy to shore up some assists and rebounds and pile on another guard. You've already got a bunch of steals. You can get some steals somewhere else. But as far as straight 9-cat goes, I'm not a huge Josh Giddey fan. I think they probably give him opportunities similar to what he was doing, not this past season, but the year before in Oklahoma City. Or frankly, even the year before that, where he got up to about 15 shots a game, 22-23 season. I don't feel like he could go higher than that in Chicago. That's a lot. 15's a lot, especially again when we're talking about Giddey, LaVine, Coby White, Ayo Dosunmu, the possible return of Lonzo Ball. Vooch is still there. There are a lot of guys that are all going to be fighting for those shots. There's really only so many dudes that can take 15. LaVine will get him if he's playing. Vooch will probably get him if he's playing. Kobe's going to try to get him if he's playing. Are there 15 left for Giddey at that point? What if he's like, nah, me instead of you? Does he get there then? Maybe. What would Josh Giddey have been 2 years ago if he did the same exact counting stats but shot 79% or 80% at the free throw line instead of 73? Definitely would have been inside the top 100 at that point. And basically, you could just punt free throw to see what he would have been that year. Just inside the top 100, interestingly, because he didn't take very many, and, you move him up to league average. So, do you want a round 100-ish? All right. I mean, he's going at 82. He's probably not going to be a disaster. He probably hovers somewhere between 80 and 100. Pretty fair, I guess, is the spot for Giddey. I don't think I'd take him any earlier than he's going, but where he's going right now, it's relatively fair. I'm okay with it. What am I showing you guys? I'm showing you guys Oklahoma City from a couple years ago. Apologies to the person that commented on the Pacers video. You're absolutely right. I should be trying to figure out a way to highlight the player that I'm talking about in any given moment on these shows. I promise to do better in that regard going forward. Although it's also worth pointing out that we only have 5 of these team preview shows left. So I'll do my best. And I think what I could do is just take my mouse and highlight the name, and you guys could see it that way. So I'll try to get better at that, at the player that I'm talking about. That way, if you're fast forwarding through, you can just see who's highlighted on the Basketball Monster rank page that I'm showing YouTubers and go from there. I once again forgot to put in a break for an ad. So, YouTube, you'll have to figure it out yourself. And I'll just drop it in during a deep breath over on the recorded side. Quickly, again, here at the end of the show, please take a moment to like, rate, and subscribe. We are growing like a weed here over the last couple of days, which is super awesome and very, very exciting for me right now. Shows are getting a lot of traction. YouTube in particular is really taking off. It's a little bit harder to see on the traditional pod side because when you're putting out like shows back to back to back to back, they kind of cannibalize each other a little bit, but those are definitely picking up as well. And we're still 2 months and a couple of days away from the start of the season. So please keep liking. It's dropping into feeds. Please subscribe. We're getting a lot of 5-star reviews on Spotify. I know that's easier to find than on Apple. If you're listening on iTunes, please, I beg of you, I need your help. I got the old show up near 900 positive reviews on Apple, and we're at like 45 for the new one. So I know you're out there, and I need your help. I'm at Dan Vespers on Twitter, at Old Man Squad. Follow that one. It'll follow you back. Old Man Squad will. I won't. I have to have the perfectly cultivated feed. Yes. I got lost in thought again on that one. I don't know. It's Sunday. It's a Sunday show. I can't focus for more than 4 or 5 minutes at a time. Tomorrow, I'm assuming the Yahoo board is about to get updated, but every time I say that, it doesn't. Here's the plan, though. If the Yahoo board is updated, we dive right into that immediately. If it's not, we're going to have a 51 through 76 episode coming up. I would also love it if you guys would submit some more draft results, whether I prefer them to be real ones. And I'll put that call out on Twitter as well. So if you got some results, plop those in there. If you got some thoughts, comments, whatever, you can throw them in the comment section. I will check those over the span of the next 24 hours. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys tomorrow.